had all the success, I had all the finances, all the opportunity in the world, where on the outside looking in, you think, oh my God, you know, he has everything. He's got it all. He has all the opportunity. He's in the papers. He's on TV and all this like stuff. But on the inside, I was miserable. To IFS, which is internal family systems. It's a modality of how to view the human mind, how to view consciousness. It was like all the puzzle pieces fit together. Everything started to make sense to how I was in childhood. It breaks my heart that humans have to carry around that amount of shame, that they don't think that they can be connected to the ones they love most. The bigger our reactivity, the bigger our emotional responses to something, the deeper a core wound is, or the more vulnerable there is something being protected.
In this episode, I speak with Trevor Bird. Trevor is a personal and professional development coach, certified in internal family systems. He is passionate about helping men heal and grow. Once a successful chef, entrepreneur, and TV star, Trevor's focus shifted after reconnecting with his late father's memory. By working through forgiveness and family shame, he feels his father's spirit now guides him in helping others. Trevor shares his story to inspire family, fathers, mothers, and siblings to reconnect and break free from the isolation caused by shame. Enjoy the conversation. Maybe just one thing. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a like or a comment at the end, or subscribe to our channel. It will help us to reach more people, invite more interesting guests that talk about more interesting topics. Thank you very much and enjoy the episode. Welcome in the Awake Insights, Trevor.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. So good to be here.
Really interesting bio. And very clearly, it's a bio that comes from your own story that made you create the work that you do. You got inspired by certain events in your life. Can you tell us a little bit more? What was the most important event in your life that made you decide to do everything you do today?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many important events in our life that kind of shape us into who we are. And, you know, I want to name that this message is becoming more clear as I do this work more. I've been coaching for about 8 years now, and it keeps on getting refined, and my message keeps on getting clearer and clearer on who I serve. And I really feel like I found my why. It's really come to a soul level of why I do what I do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it starts in childhood. It starts from my story. In childhood, I had a very challenging upbringing. I grew up very, very poor, with a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of addictions. Parents were rarely home, and when they were, it was hard, you know. And, mm-hmm. you know, my very first memories of my family are not pleasant ones. I can maybe have a handful of pleasant experiences from my childhood where I'm like, wow, that was a really great time. Mm-hmm. And through healing my own understanding of how people show up in the world and holding a lot of compassion for my family, for my mother, for my father, who weren't necessarily the best caregivers, because we're all doing the best we can with the tools that we have, really allowed me to step into complete forgiveness and offering the people that I help the opportunity that I was never able to have and never given. So I think I'll just leave it there for now, because we could take that conversation in so many different directions. But what comes up for you as I share that?
Yeah, true. What comes up in me when you share that is that I also can very relate with this in a kind of way, not exactly the same, of course, but what comes up in me was that when you experience certain traumas in your life from your childhood, you try to cope with them in a certain way when you're young. And there's a certain moment in your life, and you say it can be a few events actually, that made you decide, I have to take my life in my own hands. I have to find ways to get out of this and make myself happy and not be against the world in a kind of way. Is that something that you experienced as well? And at what kind of age was that for you?
Yeah, that's really really well stated there, Hank. And there's so much that comes up for me around that because it kind of goes in two directions. One for myself is based on before I started coaching. I was a chef and entrepreneur, and I had a lot of success. I was I would say a class B celebrity in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I had all the success, I had all the finances, all the opportunity in the world. Where on the outside looking in, you think, oh my God, he has everything. He's got it all. He has all the opportunity. He's in the papers. He's on TV and all this like stuff. But on the inside, I was miserable.
Yeah.
I was having regular emotional breakdowns. I was way overworked. It was really hard for me to regulate my emotions. And a rule of thumb that I go with today is the bigger our reactivity, the bigger our emotional responses to something, the deeper a core wound is, or the more vulnerable there is something being protected.
Yeah.
And I was just in such a protective state at that time in my life, and recognizing it's like I do have the wife, the family, the home, the things, but yet I'm still struggling. This doesn't make sense to me because society and culture tells you, oh, you get all this stuff and then you'll be good. And from basically what I explained from my childhood, it was look at me, look what I can do, external validation,
Yeah.
get. So everybody says, good job, Trevor, you're doing great. But like, it's filling that empty soul, empty black hole in your heart, trying, feeding a hungry ghost that never gets full.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of led me down this path of personal development, self-discovery, looking at my life, and thanks to my wife kind of saying, hey, your childhood was pretty messed up, you should probably look at some of that.
Mm-hmm.
And how you're showing up isn't exactly how I picture my life going. And I was like, what do you mean we have all this stuff? But yet I was not showing up as a good father, a good husband. But everybody in my business and like all that stuff was going great. And then it kind of makes you sit and think, like, what are my priorities and where am I going and what do I want to build? And so with the help of my wife nudging me in that direction, it was kind of like, okay, I need to look at some certain things here. And I'm so glad I did, because it changed my life. And I can honestly say, like, I'm the happiest, the most grounded and regulated I've ever been. And life just keeps getting sweeter as I get older.
That's amazing. So I can understand that your wife played an important role actually in starting the journey.
She did.
Yeah. Is she
I
someone
feel
that?
well, as you say that, I'm like, I feel like emotional about that, because
Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah.
she's a bit of like an angel, so to speak. I believe that certain people come into your life at certain points to kind of put you in a certain direction, and she was definitely one of those guiding lights.
Yeah. Yeah, recently I saw, I think it was a kind of a short clip where it said that people meet each other in their in the stage of their wounds or something, that people attract each other. I don't know if I say it very well, but do you understand more or less what it means? Like you meet in each other's wounds in a kind of way. Is that in your relationship too? Like, was your wife already on her own healing journey, or? Since the launch of this podcast, I haven't really introduced the True Impact Club yet. Are you looking to expand your network with other well-being entrepreneurs? Or you want to gain valuable insights into industry trends, business strategies, or sales and marketing? Or maybe you're looking for potential collaborations to grow together with like-minded entrepreneurs? If so, the True Impact Club might be perfect for you. It's a community where we meet bi-weekly to share our stories and journeys. Are you interested in joining? Just visit trueimpactclub.com to find all resources you need to become a member of the community. Thank you, and let's continue the conversation.
Well, it's interesting, Hank, because my wife comes from the most beautiful family. They are connected. They're loving. They're like they're together. Their community is amazing, and I think that's what deep down at a soul level, that's what I always wanted. Like I
Yeah.
always like, man, I just want to be fucking loved. I just want to be supported and have a community around me that loves you unconditionally. And when I met her family and her system, I was like, whoa, like this is how it should be. And then I
Yeah.
kind of like attached to that because that's what I wanted. So she comes from a very secure, safe home and family upbringing, and then I feel kind of like a long time in our relationship, I was always like the underdog, right? I was always like pedestaling her.
Yeah.
She was always the one that had all the answers. She was smart. She was the one put together. I was the messed up one. I had the issues. And that creates a really challenging power dynamic in a relationship, because in any relationship, when you pedestal someone, if they're more than you, then that means you're less than them, which means
Yeah.
that you are bad, unlovable, unworthy, whatever. So it's kind of an invitation to start to do that inner work, to be like, wait a minute, why am I less than? Why am I not stepping into my power in my relationship? So my wife was definitely comes from this very nice family.
Mm.
And when I first, that this podcast might get emotional, Hank, because like talking about my, there's a deep like soul level thing with my family where it's
Yeah.
like it's hard because there is a lot of like wounding there, and there's a lot of challenges and a
It's
lot of
all. Yeah.
around coming from where I did. And when anybody with a healthy family dynamic would look at that, they would go, okay, this isn't normal. And for me, you only know what you know. When you
Yeah.
grow up in chaos and war and anxiety, it's like that's what you know. And that's
Yeah.
why I did, and not to go in another direction, but like that's why I did so well in kitchens and in the hospitality industry, because
Yeah.
it's chaos, it's war, it's stressful, and it's like I'm home. I know
Yeah.
this. I can do this with you guys.
Yeah.
So I used to laugh a lot about my traumas. I would make jokes and make light of them, and brush them off and try to minimize them.
Mm.
And hearing her saying, "That's not really funny, man. Why are you laughing at that?" was kind of that mirror of like, "Oh, it's not. I guess
Yeah.
I should maybe look at why."
Take it more serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate with that as well. Yeah. Also, in my whole childhood, we joked about everything, and we all want to be the man. We have to be the man. We cannot be emotional or weak or all these kind of things. And all the time, I was getting triggered and triggered and triggered, and like defending and try to, yeah, build defend mechanisms around that and try to be strong. But consciously, you don't really know what's going on. Actually, I learned that years and years later, what really was happening on all these kind of different moments. So
Well,
yeah.
I think with that, there's I don't know how old you are, Hank, but like there's a certain point in a person's life. I was gonna say a man's life, but in a person's life, where we start to question things, where we're like, wait a minute, what's happening now isn't working out anymore. I'm not who I thought I was,
Mm.
or I'm lost, or I don't know who I am, because we're told all of these things, and we develop all these adaptive strategies in childhood.
Yeah.
Like when we're with friends, we learn how to be with our friends, and if we're with friends that accept manipulation and lie, and that's how they interact with each other, we adapt to fit into that. And then when we try to have an adult healthy relationship, those strategies become maladaptive, because people are like, why are you doing that? That's weird. Why are you lying? Why are you manipulating?
Yeah.
Why are you not speaking up, or whatever the strategy is? And that becomes a hindrance on trying to develop the relationships we desire. And
Yeah.
so that's when kind of the unbecoming of a person starts to go, oh, the way I was isn't how I'm going to be in the future, and how I'm going to get the things that I want to get. And I believe that starts to happen around, for a majority of people, I'm not saying everybody because it's all different, but like it starts to happen around 28,
Okay.
29 to like 40 is when we start to like break down and enter like a dark wood, or the second part of life.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's been it was in different stages. I would say I had big realizations when I was 23, 24,
Hmm.
but then I lost myself again a few years after that. And I think a big, how would I say, like a turning point was 35, between 35 and 40, something like that. Because when I was 40, then I moved outside my country to another country actually. So and that changed a lot for me as well. Yeah.
I always say I didn't start growing up until I was 32.
Yeah, you hear that more often.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. But I understand from your bio that your work is a lot focused on family relationships. You're a teacher in what is it? Internal family systems. Can
Correct.
you explain a little bit what is the concept of internal family systems and how did that help you in your healing journey?
Thanks. So that's such a great question. And I did a lot of therapy. I did men's groups. I did a lot of conscious work to step into the man I am today. And when I started to take this seriously, because I was very passionate about it, because I saw the changes that can happen in humans, and I saw the changes that were happening in me, and being able to build the life that I want, and the relationships I want, and the financial success that I want, I didn't really know how I was getting there or what I was doing. But I was part of like therapy. I was doing groups. I was doing everything. And when I got introduced to IFS, which is internal family systems, it's a modality of how to view the human mind, how to view consciousness. It was like all the puzzle pieces fit together. Everything started to make sense to how I was in childhood, to how I was as a teenager, to how it all came together in the present day. And I was sold. I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm like, this is it. Like, this is how consciousness works.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very passionate about this. I think it's so fascinating, and I can be a little preachy about it, but please take it with a grain of salt. Take what you like, throw out what you don't. I'm not here to say this is the answer, but the basic belief within IFS is that we're all made up of multiple personalities. We all have different parts to us. An easy way that you or a bunch of listeners can relate to this is a friend asks you out for coffee. There's a part of you that is, yes, I would love to go for that coffee. And maybe there's a part of you that's, I have to do work. I have to sleep. I would rather do anything but go for coffee than you. But there's a part of you that feels compelled to go for coffee.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, none of these parts are wrong. My whole thing is making sense of inner conflict. And I don't know if you can relate to having a very loud inner world, is what I would say, a very loud dialogue in your head.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing enough. Why are you only here? What have you done? And a lot of times, these parts or these voices in our head can start fighting, can become a
Yeah.
lot of what we call polarizations. You have
Yeah.
a part that's a yes and a part that's a no.
Yeah.
And, our whole universe is based on polarities, a yin and a yang, a masculine, feminine, a yes and a no. And the nature is always trying to find a balance. Just like we are part of nature, our system is trying to find balance.
Yeah.
And our vulnerabilities, like you were talking a little bit prior to, like our defense mechanisms and how we move through the world, our vulnerabilities get protected from these parts, like the parts of us that we don't want to show the world.
Mm-hmm.
Our emotional, our, if we're sad, if we're angry, if we're taught that we're never allowed to show these things in childhood, because if I do get angry as a kid in childhood, my parents yell at me. They
Yeah.
shut me down. They say little boys aren't allowed to get angry.
It's not
And so then
welcome.
I bury my anger. And then every time I feel anger, I have a part that comes in and says, nope, don't get angry. Don't
Mm.
do it, because you're going to be shamed, judged, criticized, pushed away from a caregiver.
Yeah.
And so our system starts to develop these constellations of how we relate to the world around us. And until we can heal the vulnerability, we can start to reintegrate those parts of us back into our system as a team and a whole. Our experience as a human can be pretty challenging and uncomfortable,
Mm.
anxious, depressed, angry, reactive. And so we need to learn what are we protecting within ourselves where these behaviors come out, where these behaviors start to interact with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll take a pause there because that's a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. It's really interesting. And maybe let's go a little bit more further into that. So maybe more the practical side, because I heard a lot about internal family systems, but I never did it myself. But I don't think I have a clear picture of what it really is. So can you explain how it works?
You kind of it was this whole modality was created from a family systems model. You got the right idea, where there are like in our external family, like a mother, a father, a sister, a sibling, there are roles, right? There are roles in the family where your father's a protector, your mother's a provider, however it plays out. Everybody's going to have their own individual family system. But this is your internal family. So just like an external family, you have an internal family.
Okay.
And so we have protectors, we have reactive parts, and we have vulnerabilities. So in order to help kind of tease this out a little bit, I'm going to use the analogy of like our consciousness is like a living room. And we have to know who is in our living room intimately, or the world has to experience us and has to experience those parts in our living room. If you've ever heard that expression, what mask do you wear? Like, as throughout your day, what mask do you put on? And so, in a living room, just you can use this as an example here, Hank. Dan, you don't need to say this out loud because I know it's a podcast and it can be vulnerable, but like, picture a part of you that you don't like. Maybe he's lazy, maybe he overeats, maybe he smokes pot. I don't know. Think about this. Can you identify a part of you don't like?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So this part in your living room, if we just look at him, now you have self-judgment. This is where your inner conflict starts. You have a part that's doing something, and you have another part that says, I don't like you.
Yeah.
I don't like you because you sabotage me. You don't help me get my goals met. You cause issues in my relationships. And this one says, it could say, well, I'm doing the best that I can. Shut up. Like, leave me alone. Just let me do what I'm doing. And we can spend so much time criticizing ourselves, judging ourselves, telling us we're not good enough. You're not good enough. You don't do it right. And then that creates a lot of uncomfortable feelings. And now,
is it always two personas?
I would say no. It's infinite. I mean, it's like I call them constellations because another example, just to give you something else, is like if there's a part of you that's for me, I'll use my system as an example. I have a pusher.
Yeah.
Like I have a relentless part of me that like works, that will obtain anything. But in that pursuit of working very hard and obtaining everything, he makes a lot of other parts tired.
Yeah. He
hurts other people's feelings. So I have parts so this is my pusher. I have parts that love him. Yes, like, thank God you're here. You're like, geez, where would we be without you? And then I have parts that are like, do you ever stop? You need to slow down. And I have parts here being like, you are so annoying.
Yeah.
Do you realize the damage that you cause? So it's like we have constellations, and and that's what we would call like a complex system. The more trauma somebody endures, and the more challenges and relationships you have as a child, the more fragmented your system becomes.
Hey, just a quick note from our sponsor, True Impact Agency. If you want to set up marketing funnels, create landing pages, or start advertising campaigns, they have years of experience offering these kind of marketing services. You can just get in touch with them through the website, through impactagency.com, and there's also a free ebook for you to download, where you can learn how to turn quality leads into paying customers. Thank you very much, and let's continue the episode.
The more you start to break out and into sub-personalities, and you start to shift into a lot more protective mechanisms. You're going to have to manage your vulnerability. You're going to have to firefight your vulnerability. You're going to have to push people away from your vulnerability, and it becomes very complex. So there's no one way or another. I'm trying to make this like really kind of simple to understand. But the more that you get into, and again, I can give you another example where I have a history of childhood sexual abuse. So within that, I have an abused boy that believes that he's not worthy of love. He's not worthy of connection. He's only good to be used. And he's unlovable. He feels like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So this is my, what we call an exile in IFS. And then I have protectors that are very reactive. So anytime that there's a confirmation that I'm unlovable, or I didn't do something good enough, or I feel like I'm being used, my reactivity is a short fuse. Stay the fuck away from me. Who do you think you are? And I have another part that drinks. So after that, because I feel shame because of this part, I'm just going to go get drunk, because it's so much easier to go drink till I black out than it is to feel the pain of all of those feelings.
Yeah.
So, and then you can have another part that's like kind of trying to caretake that. I have another part that fawns, which means that I move towards certain people when they start to pull away from me. I'm like, I try to chase that because I just want connection and love, but I don't know how else to get it. So I have a part that uses that as a strategy. And so you can tell right there how fragmented all these parts are. And a lot of times before you start doing this work, they don't see each other. They're not in relationship with each other. The people, the parts of us that just drink or use drugs or do anything, they're not taking any of your other system into consideration.
Yeah.
The only thing they're trying to do is get away from your vulnerability.
It's escaping, yeah.
Yeah. And so when we can start to introduce our living room to each other and say, hey, do you see this and do you see that? And they're like, oh, I'm protecting that. And then you can start to have appreciation for those parts of us that drink, that drug, that do everything, instead of making them, why do you do this? You're fucking up, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, oh, you're doing this. And I feel this like weight of sadness. It's like, oh, you're doing this because I'm so fucking hurt.
Yeah.
That's heavy, man.
It is.
That's compassion right there.
Yeah.
And
totally.
Compassion is the key to healing.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So it's like a kind of a process where you bring all these fragmented sides of yourself to your consciousness. So you're analyzing all of that. Is that a good, when you start doing that you write all these fragmented personas or parts of yourself, that you write them down? And is that a good exercise to start doing this? Or how does that work? And then maybe you connect, and maybe you make connections. I'm just thinking loud. How do you say that? Out loud?
Yeah, thinking out loud.
Out loud, that was a word. So, and then you make connections like, this side of me is resistant, and this side of me doesn't like that, and this side of me doesn't like that because of that. And then you make kind of connect the dots in a way. Is that how it works? Or I don't know.
Yeah, so, there's a whole framework, and we teach you can dive as deeply as you want into this, and we teach a 12-week intro course to this, so it's hard to, give you the whole thing in an hour or so conversation. But there's two things within this, because I believe IFS is sacred soul work. And a lot of times, just like this podcast, it's important to have the top-down approach where we think about these things, we bring it into awareness, we get curious about it, and you explain it and understand it from this. And there's another thing to experience it at a soul level.
Yeah.
It's a very experiential model where we could talk about it till I'm blue in the face. And you could be like, how does this work? How does it work? But like, in order to really understand it, it's like you got to drop in and go into it. It's like connecting with your heart. And maybe some listeners will understand that and some won't. But half of the equation is in our thinking brain, and I would say less than half, but we spend so much time trying to problem solve, trying to understand, when really, when we drop to the rules and the regulations of the soul level and the heart level, healing can be pretty powerful, shifted into a much quicker way. Slower is faster. There's a quote that I love, I believe, by Francis Weller, who's an amazing psychotherapist. The soul moves at geological time. And it takes time to get there, but the slower we move, and when we learn how to drop out of our trying to figure it out from our thinking mind, but we start to feel it in our body, our somatic experience, in our vagus nerve, in our nervous system, that's where the real healing begins to take place. And so we could go through a short little exercise for your listeners if they would be interested in doing like maybe a 5-10 minute guided meditation. I don't know if that's how you want to spend our time, but that's an option. How about this? I have a YouTube meditation. You can put the link in your bio and people can do it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I will share the links for sure here. Definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, then it's you need somebody to point the spinach out in your teeth. Doing this on your own is hard.
Totally.
Like seeing your own parts, because the analogy that I like to use in the courses is if you're a part and you go like this and you say, I'm so anxious right now. Oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. And you put your hand like this in front of your face. If everybody could put their hand over their face, I forget, not everybody's watching this, but if you put your hand over your face and you're looking around and I'm so anxious, I don't know what to do. You have no distance from your anxiety. You can't see it. It's your mask. And so what we do in IFS is we take the time, we slow it down, and we pull that anxiety a foot away from our face. And if you pull your hand away from your face by a foot, you can start to look at it. You say, oh, there it is. It's been there for a really long time. And it starts to tell me that, the world's going down a bad path, and it starts to tell me I'm in danger, and why does it tell you those things? What's its hope for you by doing that? And we start to build a relationship with your anxiety or with any presenting part. And the more that we get to know it, the more that our heart can open to it. I'm sure that you've seen people and have people in your life that you don't know very well, but you judge them. How could they do that? How could they be like this? You dehumanize them. You disconnect from your heart to their heart. And then you start going from your protective mind.
Yeah.
But then when you actually sit down with them, with that person, and you start to speak to them and get to know them, you're like, oh, you're actually really nice. And I kind of like you.
Totally.
And we start to reconnect to our heart to their heart. So just like we do that with an external person, we can do that with our own internal experience. And then the self-criticism, the self-judgment can fall away, and we can start to have a bit more understanding and love and compassion for ourselves, so that we become a bit calmer. And if I can tie that into one more thing, if you've ever been in a conflict with somebody, and you're screaming at them, you're like, God, you don't get it. What's wrong with you? How could you not understand this? And you're trying to explain to them, and they're not getting you because they just keep fighting back with you. That is the inner conflict, because that happens inside of us. But then if you've ever been in conflict with someone on the outside and they say, okay, I get it. I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me. Immediately, your nervous system just... And so when we're connected with our own parts, and instead of fighting with them, saying, stop drinking, stop doing this, stop being anxious, we say, oh, that's why. That's why you're so anxious. Fuck, that must be hard, man. And just immediately I can feel my own nervous system and that just being like, oh. That anxiety is like, you see me, you get me. I have support.
Yeah. That's
a long-winded talk there, but
yeah, no worries. Yeah. No, yeah. That the last thing that you shared, that's empathy for me. That's understanding and being open actually to understand someone else's feelings and why someone's reacting that way. Yeah, I can also again relate to this. I remember myself not being bothered too much about it, just out of self-defense for myself.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, like along the journey when you start to realize that one of the thousands of realizations that you can have and that are still happening and coming, I guess, that yeah, it's so beautiful to relate to that and stop defending and resisting and yeah, and take a step back and understand what's really going on actually, and then you end up in another kind of flow, which is more constructive. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Totally. Yeah. Um, can you share a little bit about, and also that was a part of your bio actually, the role of your father in your life and how that impacted you and also what you do today? I know that you also in your work you focus more on men. Is that also related to your father or not? I'm curious about that actually, about that story.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, this kind of gets into the core of and my why of what I do. And I just want to name, like, I do work with females as well. But men, I generally draw on more men, and I do work with a lot of men. So, yeah, like I was saying, my childhood was hard. You know, the first memories of my father were him physically abusing my mother and lots of yelling and screaming. And my father was always a very intense guy, very intense. I only remember he was always like this. He was always like this. He was always like, like, I love you, I love it, like, just so much energy and not open energy. But he was also an addict. He was addicted to opiates, and uh, one of my last memories of him was getting taken out of my house, being arrested for domestic violence. When I was about 5 years old. The last time I saw my dad, I was 12. I didn't see him from about not 8 till 12, and then I saw him once when I was 12, and my mom was like, never again. I don't know, whatever, just family bullshit. Never saw him, and I didn't see him for 25 years. And just laugh it off, shrug it off. Oh, whatever. My dad's crazy, and I've only ever heard of my father's craziness
Mm-hmm.
growing up. He did burn down his own house because he didn't want anybody else to have it. He pulled a gun on my brother. Like, he had severe mental challenges, emotional challenges, and it was easier for me to just shut that out of my life. Oh, I don't need that in my life. It's just going to cause problems. And as I started to look at myself and my own shortcomings as a human, I started to realize that we're all human. We all have shortcomings. We all have mental health challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this, by being introduced to a men's group in 2016. And when I was in that men's group, there was extremely successful entrepreneurs in there. And it was just like such a nice environment to be like, oh, we're all in the same journey here. We're all fucking trying our best and struggling. And then I started to realize that, my dad was probably a struggling dude. Like, he was probably having some hard times, and he needed to use these things to help manage his pain.
Yeah.
And yeah, it starts to get like pretty intense when I look back at, like, not having a dad because he just couldn't face us with the pain that he was holding.
Yeah.
And so I don't hear from him for 25 years. I'm kind of like, should I reach out to dad? Because all I know about him are these stories. All I know about him are what everybody else has told me about him, but I don't actually know him.
Mm.
And then 3 years ago, my brother calls me and says, "Hey, Dad passed." And I was just like, "It's okay. Like, no harm, no foul. I don't know this guy.
Mm.
It's probably better off that he is gone
Mm.
because he just hurts people." And from my recollection from childhood, all I know him is he hurts people.
Yeah.
And my brother says, "You should call his caregiver," because he lived in like an assisted home where he needed a lot of help. And when I called his caregiver, she said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was such a good man."
Mm.
The story never gets easier to tell. I've told it so many times, but it's
Mm.
to my father that he was just a hurting guy that didn't think he was worthy enough of a family.
Yeah.
She said he followed your whole career. He watched you on TV. She said, I asked him to get a hold of you, but he always refused. And I would have rather had a father in my life that said, "I'm sorry," than have no father at all.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart that humans have to carry around that amount of shame, that they don't think that they can be connected to the ones they love most.
Mm.
You know, the sad thing about shame is that we tell ourselves that we're unlovable, we're no good, we're so bad. But in reality, we're not as bad as shame tells us we are. Toxic shame.
No.
Because if my father just would have said, "Hey, I'm sorry that I wasn't the best dad," I would have been with him with an open heart, man. I would have welcomed him in and said, "Hey, it's okay." Like,
Yeah.
maybe it's not okay, but I mean, you know, we'd be on that journey together.
Yeah.
And so through, you know, really sitting with the grief of losing him, and not to get into too much of the spiritual, I call it like the woo-woo realm,
Yeah.
but through psychedelic experiences, through doing IFS sessions, because they are quite deep, and I do believe they take you to another space and time.
Mm-hmm.
He has now shown up in my life as a phoenix that can give me the strength to help men be the man that he was never able to be.
Yeah.
And that is my soul work.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, so you didn't know your father very well, actually, because he left you when you were 12.
Yeah.
So, in the work that you do, it is very much inspired by your father, if I understand well. So, how does that work then? What learnings do you take from your father, although you haven't known him so long, actually, or so well, in the work that you do, which seems to be so important and related to him?
Yeah. Yeah, so like I was saying, you know, my father's shame. You know, I believe that there's kind of shame can kind of split into two forks in a road, where you have toxic shame and healthy shame. And my father had so much toxic shame that he was unable to connect with his family. And just from what I know of his defense mechanisms, his protective mechanisms, he had a lot of vulnerabilities. He had a lot of pain. And he needed to protect his pain through opiates, through avoidance, through that fragmented system we were talking about. Many different protectors. And as I can appreciate how much pain he's had and how much shame he had to carry his whole life, where he didn't believe that he was worthy of anything. If he did believe he was worthy of love and connection, he would have reached out.
Mm.
And that breaks my heart. Because no human is not worthy of love and connection.
Mm.
It's one of our basic needs to build a happy and fulfilled life. And our shame, like I was saying, lies to us. Our shame tells us all these things. Even if I had a bipolar father that I could support, I could support in some way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
would have been an honor.
Yeah.
And I know that I have carried a lot of shame. I still like, if you don't heal your shame, it keeps us disconnected. It keeps us fragmented.
Mm.
And so the only thing that I need to know about my father is that he was a hurting man. He was in a lot of pain. And he didn't think he was worthy of love.
Yeah.
The rest doesn't matter.
Mm. Yeah, now I understand it completely. It's by going to our own healing journey that you learn so much about other people as well. And in this case, it's your father. But it can be all kinds of people. Also the people that you meet, the new people that you meet in your life, friends, old friends. You start to understand more actually why people are responding this kind of way or that kind of way, or why this happened and this in the past. So it all makes sense actually. Yeah, definitely. And that's the beauty of this kind of work, that this realization, this understanding, the compassion that comes out of that for people, instead of the anger and resentment. And once you understand someone and you understand the dynamics behind why people are acting a certain kind of way, everything becomes different. The emotion becomes different. There's more compassion. So, and that's beautiful. I would wish everyone to experience that and to realize that actually in their life. And I think it's because of the work that you do and other people that are also mostly coming into my podcast, and much more that will come in the future. This is a foundation in a lot of cases actually to start this process and this journey to have this kind of realizations. And then you can find peace in your relationships, your past relationships, current, future. So that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Can you share a little bit more about the man, if you have, and I'm sure you have, like, man today? What are the man's today's challenges in society, and how did that changed over the years? I follow many other podcasts and people, and there's a lot conversations going on about that. And because you focus mostly on men, I know you will also work with women, but you mostly focus on men. So I'm curious about how you perceive that today, and what advice would you give men actually in society? And maybe there is a difference in generation. You have like the young man and then people of our generation maybe. So I want to understand a little bit how you look at it.
Yeah, so starting at the surface level, we all carry pain. We all carry shame. And shame is a pretty intense topic. So I'm going to try to keep it easy to digest. But shame tells us that we're not worthy of connection. Shame tells us that we are not allowed to be connected with someone else. And men, especially, are going to avoid our shame today. So we're going to have shame. We're going to say, I'm not worthy of connecting with someone else, so I'm going to bury myself in work.
Yeah.
I'm going to bury myself in providing. I'm going to bury myself in addictions. whether that's porn, scrolling, social media, whatever, like doesn't working out, being healthy. These are all addictions, and some are just more socially acceptable than others. And I want to name, as I say this, there's no criticism or judgment. It's just talking about it. Because shame is very sensitive to criticism and judgment. And so when you get that, like, the more sensitive you are to hearing it or evoking shame, probably the more vulnerable and the more shame there is. And so there's this myth of vulnerability in today's culture, I believe, where they say you need to be more vulnerable, you need to open up more, you need to connect more. Sure, it's great from up here, the thinking level, that top-down approach, but if it's not understood at the soul level, or your soul is still holding on to shame, that unconscious belief that I'm no longer lovable, just like, I'll use example of being abused, sexually abused as a child, and you don't actually do the soul work around that, the somatic experience of that, you're just going to rationalize it and make sense of it up here, which is not going to heal it or not going to help you move forward. So I need to be more vulnerable. Then you go in the world, you be more vulnerable, and society, social media, your friend group that you have just fucking destroy you. Like, they're just like, make fun of you, criticize, judge you, what are you doing, shame you, further suppressing your vulnerability.
Yeah.
So my answer and advice, or just kind of something to think about, because I don't like to say you should do this, but just something to think about and sit with when you listen to this, is if I'm struggling with something, if I'm struggling because I work too much, if I work out, for 4 hours a day, if I smoke pot uncontrollably, if I get really angry and, verbally destroy someone, those are all like the neon signs being to, like, this is where we need to go for healing. Mm. The amount of support groups that exist right now in the world are, you Google, losing a partner group, anger groups, whatever, drinking, AA, whatever. Mm. Surround yourself in a safe environment, in a community where people will hold you and understand you. Just because you're surrounded with the people you are today doesn't mean they're necessarily a safe group of people. Again, no criticism, no judgments. But when you start being very vulnerable with your partner, because your wife says, be vulnerable, and then you start being vulnerable, and she's like, don't cry, that's really unattractive, or, don't show that here because it doesn't make me want to be close to you, or, oh, why do you cry all the time? Or why are you trying to be vulnerable with me? Mm. You need a group where your vulnerability can be held and supported. Yep. Where it can be understood, because no change can take place within a human when moral judgment and criticism is present. Mm. If you want somebody to change, including ourselves, if we are judging and criticizing ourselves, if we're judging and criticizing another, that's not going to inspire someone to say, hey, I need to look at my life and be different. Mm. That's going to close us down, further repress us, push us away. So we need to create an environment, the safe environment, where there's a curiosity, a compassion, a desire to understand what's going on. So finding a safe group of men to be vulnerable with is probably one of the most goddamn healing things a man could ever do. Because we tell ourselves, I'm the only one, nobody gets me, nobody understands, and you sit in a room with 10 to 12 other men that say, fuck me too, man. Oh, the weight, the connection that takes place. That in itself is therapeutic and very healing.
That's so true.
Because now we're connected again, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're not saying we're nobody gets me, I'm disconnected. Now it's like, oh, I'm connected with you. Like, I get you, I'm with you. My heart and my head, like, we can jam with each other. And so finding a similar group of people that deal with the same challenges is a really good place to start. And just Google whatever you think your issue is and support group.
Yeah.
If you're a man, go men's support group. If you're an alcoholic, alcohol support group.
Yeah. Totally.
It's all out there.
Totally.
Same for women.
Yeah, it's true, and it doesn't always have to be that specific. I think, like you say, man support group, woman support group can maybe already be enough, because you're
Yeah.
gonna be surprised when you do that for the first time. And I'm talking for myself, how many similarities we see in each other. We're all kind of on the same journey. We all kind of have the same kind of struggles. We all have the same kind of needs that are not met, things that happened in our life. I remember the first men's circle I did in Bali was when I stepped out of that room. It was like, wow, what the hell that just happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is, yeah, I don't know what word to say. Maybe a kind of encouragement. I would encourage everyone that's listening to this to try it, and just get rid of the taboos that exist today, actually, of man circle or man gathering together, and to be vulnerable and to share. Get rid of all of that and just try it one time, because it's life changing, really.
Yeah.
And same for a woman.
Yeah, same thing. No different. I mean, women have their own shame boxes that they put themselves into. If a woman can't have a child or wants to be a mother and can't, and like they're going to have their own stories. And that's not to say men need men and women need women.
Yeah.
It's not like, especially in a just a couple partnered relationship, and this goes for same-sex marriages as well, or same-sex relationships, where it's not your partner's it's not your partner's responsibility to carry your rage, resentment, and big emotions.
Mm.
We all have emotions, we all have big emotions, and it's important for women to go be with women to process some of it, and it's important for men to go be with men and process some of it. Because if I'm resentful towards my wife, I'm not like, and I start just like blasting her with resentment, that's not very respectful. That's not going to get the connection that I want. That's not going to create the relationship I want. But if I can go to a group of like men, 5, 10, whatever, one other guy, 10 other guys, and be like, God, my wife just won't stop doing this, and this, and this. And you have a well facilitated group of people that are like, yeah, we get that because we feel that. And how are you going to make your relationship better moving forward? How are you going to speak your needs?
Yeah.
So you get held, and then you get supported into move into your integrity. Move into how are you going to build the relationship that you want. They accept you for who you are and call you forward to be better.
Mm.
Just like as a man, we shouldn't be responsible for our partner's rage. How do they go to their women's group or their community, process that so they can come back from a grounded place and say, hey, this is what's going on for me. I'm feeling really angry because this, and this. How do we fix this?
Mm.
Because if we don't process those emotions, they will start to, seep out of the cracks. They're going to come out in really messed up strategies.
Mm.
If we never learn how to speak authentically and within integrity, we're going to think of strategies on how to do that. We'll lie, we'll manipulate, we'll not be totally honest.
Mm.
Strategies are, and they can really hurt. They can really hurt the other person. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So true. So true. Yeah. And we still live, in my opinion, in a society that is full of strategies, which in that sense causes a lot of superficial relationships, contacts, and I'm done with that already for some time, actually. And if that means that you have to cut relationships, then it's so be it. It's better like that. And at the same time, I still feel it's challenging to find a real meaningful relationships. And I think that's part of what I try to do with this podcast, and what all my guests try to do, to learn and teach people how to find meaningful relationships. So yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that, because if this message to your audience and perhaps mine can touch one person, I mean, it was worth it.
Totally. Yeah. So true. Yeah. Mhm. So, explain a little bit what is exactly the work that you do. If I understood well, it's partly internal family systems, and then you coach men actually. Um, for what exactly? I didn't get that completely. Why? What is the transformation that men are going through when they work with you? And maybe explain that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. So, I teach IFS in a 3 month container, and I see clients 1-on-1, and I teach. I host men's containers, and the transformation is understanding yourself more. It is a men's support group.
Okay.
Whether you're coming in with like, I'm not in the relationship. I do tend to work with a lot of fathers, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of guys that have done it. They've got all the things, and then they're like, wait a minute, I'm still miserable. Wait a minute, my wife still doesn't like love me. I still have really challenging relationships with my kids. And so we work on relationship dynamics. Like, how do we build the life that you truly desire? Because you have the family and the kid and the business because you wanted it. Like, you wanted to get there, and then you got it, and you're still not fulfilled.
Mm.
So it's understanding, reconnecting to your heart, because we did that from here. Society, culture, everybody else told me this is what I need. I got it, but I'm not connected to here. I'm pointing at my heart for people just listening to this. Like, I did everything from my thinking brain, but I didn't do it from my heart. So we reconnect with your heart, what you truly want, how to communicate and speak for your needs, how to step into your integrity, your authenticity, your power, if you will, to be the container for your family that they deserve and you desire.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. So today there's a support group. Is there something else in the future that you're working on, that you're thinking about doing to spread more the message? Being in this podcast is one amazing thing, of course, to spread the message, and probably more podcasts. So is there something else that is coming up for you that you're working on?
I think the thing that I'm most excited about is hosting that men's group. I mean, it's
Mm.
relatively new. I've done 3
Okay.
cohorts so far, and this is kind of like a new thing for me, that is going really well. I work for an anger management practice out here in Vancouver, and I've been running men's groups for them for 2 years now, and I'm going to continue to do it because I like the guy that runs it. He's an incredible man, and he hosts a really good men's group. He focuses around anger,
Mm.
and yeah, just like continuing to build the group container for people to do their healing work, I think is so important. And especially within the IFS model, like, and I know we're kind of running out of time, and could be a whole other hour-long conversation, but leading groups with the IFS container can be absolutely transformative to your immediate romantic relationships, your friendships, your colleagues, your relationship to work, to be able to find fulfillment and freedom in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all this. One question that I mostly ask at the end of the podcast is if there's one thing that we haven't really talked about that you think is maybe worth mentioning, what would it be? And if there's not really a topic, if you feel like, okay, yeah, we touched already on most of kind of the things, what advice would you give people just when they want to start their healing journey, or if they're struggling along the way or something like that?
I think I would just leave it simply with the best investment, the best money ever spent, in my experience, has been on myself and my healing. And so I know that it can be scary. You can justify why not to do it. It's really easy to talk yourself out of getting to know yourself. But even if it's an online course, there's plenty of online courses out there that you can start to do your own exploration, buying a book. But if you start to get your inside right, the outside world just starts to fall into place. And that's relationally, financially, everything. So, yeah, take the leap if ever you've thought about it. You will
Yeah.
not be upset about it in 5 years.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think mentioning the fact that reading books or learning from books is super important is because sometimes I forget about this in this age where we have everything online and we watch videos and all this kind of things. But yeah, books were for me so important actually at the start of my healing journey. And it's a low barrier, right? It's like a book doesn't cost tons actually, and there's so much valuable information in there. So yeah, thanks for reminding me that.
Of course.
And to conclude this podcast, I would really like to thank you for being here, for sharing all this interesting, beautiful, inspiring information, to share your own story. And I wish you a lot of success with the men's group, how that will unfold, and everything else you will do together with that or after that. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hank. And just so we don't forget, because I think you mentioned this, you can find me on Instagram at the Trevor Bird, and trevorbird.com for my website. You can find out, join the newsletter, see anything that's going on there.
Yeah, everything will be shared in the comments or in the description actually of the recording. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Hank. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you as well.